But we got to switch gears here and talk Sam Bankman-Fried, who has been found guilty of all 7 charges he was facing, including wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. Here now with the details is our own Alexis Keenan. Hey, Alexis.
Good morning. Yeah, it was a very somber and tense in that courtroom last night. The jury deliberating for just under, I would say, 4 hours. So this was an incredibly swift verdict, finding Bankman-Fried guilty on all 7 charges brought by the Justice Department. Those charges: wire fraud conspiracy, as well as securities fraud and commodities fraud and money laundering. Together, when you add up all of these charges, they have consequences of 110 years in prison. Bankman-Fried will likely be sentenced to far less than that, a fraction of that, but nonetheless could result in decades behind bars. He is also facing another set of criminal charges that the government has to decide by February whether they will actually bring those charges. They're related to bank fraud and also campaign finance donations that the government says are illegal. Now, the jury heard evidence about what Bankman-Fried told investors, lenders, customers about the deposits on FTX's exchange versus what he actually did with the money. We now know that his hedge fund, Alameda Research, was using that money, leveraging it, spending it on real estate, on political donations, and other expenditures, other investment, large multi-billion-dollar investments, using that money. And they did not believe Bankman-Fried's testimony when he got up, took the stand, and in his own words said as CEO that he did not know that Alameda had accrued a whole of $10 to $14 billion using those customer assets. So the jury not buying his own words there. But guys, Bankman-Fried has potentially a long road ahead. He may still be facing other charges.
Alexis, I wonder if you can put this in context for us, because I know you've covered a lot of legal cases. White-collar crime, specifically, we were talking about this during Elizabeth Holmes as well, don't always see it prosecuted with sort of the way in which this was, right? I mean,
Sure.
we're talking about a big scale, sort of now, you know, he's been charged with fraud here, but can you speak to how significant this is in the context of past cases that we have seen? You know,
Sure.
4-week trial, 4 hours of deliberation, 110 years potentially.
Yeah, so I think, you know, most recently I covered the Elizabeth Holmes case, and she was facing 144 years in prison. That case, though, took 6-7 years to bring her to justice. But definitely the Justice Department is interested in cases that have a lot of media attention like this one, right? Because it can send a message about this type of behavior. And so certainly with so much debate still about whether cryptocurrencies are commodities, whether they're securities, and we saw a mix of that in this case, with that being unsettled, the Justice Department does want to send a message that this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated. Of course, on the securities side, there are regulations in place, reporting in place that can protect assets when it comes to investors. But on the commodities side, you know, in terms of Bitcoin, which seems to be somewhat settled, that's a different story because the laws do not require as much reporting. So customers are a bit more vulnerable there. So certainly this case would be exemplary for the Justice Department and is certainly meant to send a message.
And Sam Bankman-Fried set to be sentenced in March. We should point out, by the way,
March
his
28th.
inner circle, right, closest inner circle, also still need to be sentenced. We're talking about his former girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, who led Alameda among that group. That's expected to take what, next year?
Yes, so 3 top executives will be sentenced next year. And the reason that that is put off is because the government has entered deals with them for their testimony, for their cooperation during the year that they put together this case, through their testimony at trial. The government wants to make sure that they got up on that stand, told the truth, and lived up to their promises before they're going to get their sentences, because all of that behavior will be considered when it's time for them to stand up in front of a judge and receive their consequences for the actions that they pled guilty to.